First school of thought. Neoclassical economics. Now, first of all, Neo was not only a wonderful character in a fine film, but it just means new, right? So new classical economics. I mention that because the first school of thought I'm going to start talking about is actually classical economics, and it's not the same thing as neoclassical, but it arose directly from it, right? And what I want to do here, let me look at my notes again. What I want to do here is to back up in time to the year. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I want to tell you what this school of thought emerged from, all right? In the sense that no development, whether it be in art or science or whatever, emerges in a vacuum. It emerges in the context of particular historical events. And, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that the air conditioner can be a bit of a problem here. I'll say that again. That I want to talk about, sorry if you didn't hear much of the first part, but I mean, you know, you could turn it up a bit and you could probably hear a little bit of it. But basically, I haven't started covering anything. I'm going to start with what movements led to classical economics, which then, of course, leads eventually to neoclassical economics. And let me start with this. I always thought this was a really interesting phenomenon that I learned about from a book by a guy named, oh man, I can picture the guy. I've actually met him. I can't think of it. Anyway, I almost had it. But years ago, I assigned this book in the intro class, and I really thought this was very interesting. I want to take you back, way back, to a period in Western history when people believed, that's the sun, where, oh, let me zoom in, let me move the camera in a little bit, since I'm going to be writing on the board here. Oh, that's a heck of a drawing there, John. Why did you go into economics and not into art? Okay, that is, you know, planets and so forth. And which one is us? You are here, all right? That geocentric worldview, the idea that the Earth is in the center of the universe, everything revolves around us, right? Well, I don't know, I can't give you exact years of when this was popular in Western Europe, but you know, certainly Copernicus got in big trouble for suggesting otherwise, because he got, wait, I don't think Copernicus got excommunicated, because, no, I think he did. And Galileo as well. They got in trouble, let's put it that way, with the Catholic Church for suggesting otherwise. And one may wonder, why would this have anything to do with religion? Well, there's a French sociologist, pardon me, I hope that's not the COVID, Emile Durkheim, that says that people rank, or societies rank people and things the same way. So here we're ranking things, right? Well, in medieval Europe, everything is very hierarchical. You got your peasants, you got your clergy, you got your aristocracy and so forth. And this was very much the same way. We have the earth right in the center, all us imperfect beings. And then as you moved out, you eventually would get to heaven. Heaven's out here somewhere, almost just off the screen. And everything's perfect there, all right? So as we move away from the imperfection that is humanity, then things are perfect. In fact, did you ever wonder why Galileo got in big trouble for saying that there were valleys and rivers on the moon? You're like, so what? And the craters, like, so what? The existing belief at the time was that, let's say that's the moon right there, that's just a picture on the moon. There aren't actually mountains and craters and stuff. Those are just pictures that God put on there. That actually the moon is a perfect sphere because the moon is closer to God. That as we move out this way, you're getting closer and closer to God, so these things must be perfect. And to suggest otherwise is blasphemous. To suggest that, no, I can see, like, canals on Mars, and stuff like this. Canali, that's Italian for canals. They're saying, why would you be upset about that? Well, because we were taught otherwise. Now, I was trying to think of an example one day in class. I went to 12 years of Catholic school, and I got to thinking, what if, we're told in Catholic Church and in, I guess, all Christian churches that Mary, Jesus' mother, was a virgin. Who cares? What if you'd been told since you were little that no, actually Mary had 3 other kids, and Jesus came along as a surprise. Who knows? Well, especially given the angel thing. So, I mean, who really cares whether it was? That doesn't substantially change the story. You could easily have grown up believing that that Mary was not a virgin. All right, and you would have been like, okay, that's just the way the story works. But you weren't taught that. So, if they turned up some documents from Jerusalem, it's like, whoa. These are the birth certificates for some of Mary's other kids. She wasn't a virgin after all. Then there'd be all kinds of controversy. And why? Because it's wrong that Mary had already had other children? Or that Mary wasn't a virgin? No, nothing wrong with that, but it wasn't the story we had been told. And when you find out that that's not right, you start thinking, well, what else did I learn that wasn't right? It really shakes you up. So, we've got this worldview that was put together by, a number of people, but Ptolemy is often credited with putting together a system of equations to explain the movements of all the heavenly bodies here, with the earth in the middle and everything revolving around it, which if you think about it, is pretty dang clever because it ain't right. That to put together a set of equations to prove something that's wrong is much harder than equations that prove something that's already right. So far as we know. We're just taking the astronaut's word for it. So this was very upsetting to people for Copernicus and Galileo to come along and say, no, it doesn't work like that. Actually, the way it actually works is, let's see, I'll use orange for the sun. I'll even color it in a bit. Look at that, would you? And then here's Mercury. Oh, sorry, that's a terrible Mercury. Well, not that I know what Mercury looks like. Venus. I'm going to use green for us. Here's us right here. You are here. Okay, so there's the Earth now, which you can barely see up there. So Copernicus and Galileo are saying that no. It looks like this. We revolve around the sun. The sun doesn't revolve around us. And as a matter of fact, we're not even the first planet. We're the 3rd planet from the sun. Well, again, by the way, as an aside, a lot of astronomers already believe this. They just keep their mouths shut. All right, that it seemed perfectly logical to them. But what Copernicus and Galileo really did was come up with some strong evidence in supporting that view. So anyway, going back to the Catholic Church and so forth, why would they get in trouble for this? Well, again, because everyone had this different viewpoint, and now all of a sudden, notice here, we're not the center of God's attention anymore. All right, so this is really, as the author, Ray Canterbury, that was his name, I just remembered his name. Ray Canterbury, as he said, it was like an identity crisis for Western Europe. Probably not for your average mudslinging peasant, they probably didn't know what was going on, but for your intellectuals and so forth, right? And they're like, oh my gosh, I almost said oh my God, which actually would have been more accurate. Where do we fit in God's scheme? Where do we fit? If this is the way the universe works, if we're not the center, and the center of God's attention, and we don't have this deep, we have in some perspectives that hell is underneath us, right? Well, why? Because it's right in the middle, in the most imperfect part of the universe in this other view. And then as you move out, things are more and more perfect. Well, we got Galileo and Copernicus come along and cause all this trouble. And as I said, Western Europeans had a bit of an identity crisis. They're trying to figure out, well, where do we fit into God's plan? If this is the right way, the way that things actually work, then where do we fit in? Getting close to economics. Along come a feller whose theories went a long way to helping Western Europeans kind of come to grips with this, and he's so famous, they named a cookie after him. Isaac Fig Newton. Actually, there used to be a bunch of commercials in the old days where they said that they aren't cookies, they're Fruit Newtons, as part of the little marketing thing. But it's a cookie. All right, so Isaac Newton comes along, and he says, well, wait a minute. He says the universe is governed by natural laws, and they operate in systems. So that what happens is, God doesn't need to intervene on a daily basis to make sure that the sun rises. God created the system, and it just does it by itself, all right? They describe, I'm sure you've heard this before, that Thomas Jefferson as a deist, as someone who believed that, God sort of created the universe and then stepped back and said, hey, I got other stuff to do. God as a watchmaker. God winds the watch up, lets go, hey, it runs itself now, all right? Now, if God wants to intervene and reach down there and stop that second hand, God can. But God doesn't have to, because the system runs itself now. God created a system. God created natural laws, all right? And so this is the sort of thing that Newton is arguing, that a body in motion stays in motion, a body at rest stays at rest, all that kind of stuff. These are laws. He figures he's describing what God created. Nowadays, in the physics department at TCU, if you wrote a paper for a scholarly journal in which you said, and then God accelerated the proton, you probably wouldn't get published. But back in those days, it was still very common to believe that, or to tie these things directly to God. Let me see when Newton was alive, because this is very interesting here, as you'll see here in a moment. Because he overlaps with the next person we're going to talk about here. Let's see. Okay. When did Isaac Newton live? 1642 to 1727. Okay, so he sets about kind of resolving this problem for Western European intellectuals, which included many clergy. Having been to Catholic school for 12 years, I happen to know that they're not allowed to have sexual relations, so what the hell, let's just do some research, all right? So we've got, what's the guy's name? Kepler doing, coming up with all kinds of mathematical concepts, and who's the guy that did all the inheritance stuff? Oh man, the one that did the bean plants and stuff. You remember that from high school? I can't remember the guy's name right now. But actually a bunch of not so much nuns, because women weren't allowed to do much back then, but a lot of priests and monks were doing lots of research as well. And this was very pleasing to them, because think about it. And this is kind of funny. Kepler apparently would sit there in Mass and look around at all the angles in the church. And so he's not paying attention, right? This guy should be paying attention at Mass. He's a monk or a priest, whatever he was at that point. But oh no. To Kepler, he's revealing God's beauty is revealing itself to him through, side angle side and, all those things that you learned about geometry. And so this was really a huge deal to Western Europeans to be able to say, that's how science and God reconcile themselves. God created the science. God created these natural laws. So this was a really, let's see what I got here. Yeah, really important phenomenon in Western European history. Adam Smith. Let me do Adam Smith in a different color. Adam Smith. Oops, idiot. I was already doing the H. Adam Smith, and let's ask the internet when Adam Smith lived. When did Adam Smith live? 1723 to 1790. All right. Now notice there that when Smith, or I should say it this way, when Newton died, Smith was 4 years old. So when Smith is growing up, Newton's ideas have already taken hold and are already being, hailed as a way of reconciling science. We've got things rolling again in terms of doing research on various things. So Smith figures, get this, and this is a very, very common thing. We're going to see this in a couple other schools of thought where they sort of pick up on whatever the popular concept of the day was, and of course you would. That's the newest and most exciting concept. Smith figures, if God created a system of natural laws that govern the universe, I'll bet God created a system of natural laws that govern the economy. And that's where we get Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations going through identifying natural laws. These are the natural laws of behavior in the economy. All right. So this is the first of three. You'll see in chapter 1 The first of the three big influences on neoclassicism, natural law. That this was a very powerful influence on Adam Smith, the idea that, God created these natural laws and there must be natural laws of economic behavior as well. People are naturally self-interested. People are naturally rational and so forth. And it carries on till today, that these ideas all stemming from Newton's work. You also notice this sort of systemic idea that, Newton is saying that these natural laws operate together in a system. Not that Smith drew any graphs, but market system. So we have natural laws driving the demand curve here. People are naturally self-interested. They want to pay less for something. And they're rational. So they know not to pay more if they can get away with paying less. So that's why we have the downwardly sloping demand curve, is that people want to pay as little as possible for whatever good or service. Upwardly sloped supply curve, because the producer's on the opposite end, right? They want to get as much as possible. So we have a couple of very simple natural laws, according to Smith. And those natural laws then translate into market system, right? So that's the first of the three things I want to tell you about in terms of big influences on neoclassical, or really strictly speaking, classical economics. The second one, okay, you've heard of this René Descartes fella. He insisted on pronouncing his name René Descartes, but since he's dead, I don't really care what he thinks. I'm going to call him René Descartes. And Descartes there's no accent there, is there? Je ne sais pas. Descartes, you know what he's famous for, right? I think, therefore I am. What, are you kidding me? That makes you famous? What does it even mean? I can tell you what it means, because I understand it now. What Descartes was thinking about was, remember I showed you in an earlier video, premise number 1, premise number 2, however many premises you want, leading to a conclusion. And remember I said that validity is pretty objective, that the problem is the cogency, or the reasonableness of the premises themselves. Well, Descartes is thinking, well, what if we could come up with some premises that were absolutely unassailable, that you couldn't possibly argue with, that these premises were clearly, no one would say they aren't true, all right? If we could build an argument out of premises that are so obviously true we can't reject them, then we can build a perfect argument. Because all we got to do then is be careful about the validity. If we've got the premises down pat, all we worry about then is the validity, which is fairly objective and not that hard to pull off. So, Descartes is trying to figure out, I'm sure there's a lot more to it than this if I was a philosophy professor, but this is what I know. Descartes was trying to figure out, what kind of premise could I come up with that's like, okay, that's so obviously true, who could possibly disagree with that? And I need to say this. In that continuum that I showed you earlier, between observation and intuition, did that get on the board? It sure did. In thinking about the premises for my argument, in trying to decide, do I go out and do research and check to see, the example I used before, if dogs really do like chewing on pens? Or do I just sit there and think to myself, well, yeah, of course they would. They're tasty. Maybe you eat a couple yourself to find out. And so, yeah, of course they would. They're tasties over here. Over on this side, we need to observe some dogs. How many? I don't know, 1,000, 10,000, a quadrillion, who knows? To figure out whether dogs really like chewing on pens or not. If you didn't see the earlier video, then you won't get that. So, Descartes leaned heavily to this end. His particular concern was, and this is very interesting in today's environment, his particular concern was that the powers that be can affect what information we get about the real world. You hear about fake news. Well, that's what he's talking about. He's talking about people trying to manipulate you by filtering information and altering information. And I remember I didn't really understand it that way. And I had a philosophy student in one of my classes, and he was telling me this, and I was like, so Descartes was talking about the Matrix. I hope you've seen the Matrix, where Neo, who is also in the name of our school of thought here, Neo saw the world as it was. This hacker guy, who's also Keanu Reeves. He saw the world as it was, but didn't really believe that's the way it was. He had this gut feeling that there's something weird going on. And only intuition can give you that. Only intuition can give you that. So Descartes leaned heavily towards the idea that we rely upon intuition in creating the premises of our arguments, in building the assumptions for our theories. And so, going back to I think, therefore I am, did he go out and do a big research study to determine I think, therefore I am? No, he's like, hey, wait a minute. If I'm thinking, I must exist. And if I try to prove that particular premise wrong, I'm doing so by thinking, and aha, you exist. You can't prove that it's wrong. It's impossible to prove that it's wrong, because by trying to prove that it's wrong, you're thinking and existing. Right? I don't really get it entirely myself, but that would be plugged in here as your premise number one, and then you build some kind of argument. Well, Neoclassical economics leans heavily towards the idea that we should be using intuition to build our premises rather than observation. Now, everyone operates on a continuum here. Relatively speaking, we're leaning this direction over here. There's a great, let me see if I can find it while I'm sitting here. There's a great quote from an economist from years ago talking about Control-Alt-Delete, put in my TCU password. There's a great quote from years ago: if economists wanted to study horses. Ronald Coase, very famous economist, one of the leading figures in new institutionalist economics. Oh man, it's not out here. I'll put Coase in. I want the picture. Yeah, oh, there he is. Okay, hang on. They wouldn't. Okay. I have never, ever not found it right away. And if we were in class right now, physically, I'd still be looking for this, so that not much different. Oh, I found it! Open link in new tab. No, I don't want link in new tab. I want open image in new tab. Here we go. Get my cord untangled here. If economists wished to study the horse, they wouldn't go and look at horses. They'd sit in their studies and say to themselves, what would I do if I were a horse? And I've seen it attributed to Eli Devins and to Ronald Coase. I don't know who actually said it. But anyway, that's about this right here. It's about that rather than going out and looking, and why? Because they're lazy? No. There's a philosophical difference here. They're leaning towards Descartes' idea that the information that we gather could be contaminated. So we're better off leaning on just thinking about logically, well, what's something that makes so much sense that nobody could reject it? And so, that's how we come up with our premises. And dang it, I was just going to tell you something else. Well, let me tell you this in the meantime. Now, this is called Cartesian deductivism, and let me read you here what it says about it. Because our senses cannot be trusted, economics is best understood by relying on intuition rather than observation. And actually, it's very unlikely that economists got this from Descartes. Descartes was alive at the same time. Hey, let's find out. I've already erased when everybody else was alive anyway, so. Well, what the heck? I can kind of remember. Let's see. When was Descartes alive? 1596 to 1650. So that's going to put him right before Newton. And certainly in plenty of time to have influenced Smith. Except There was another group of philosophers, and it's in the book. I'm always get stuck on the name here. Scottish Common Sense Philosophy, I think is what it's called. And it had a very similar view. Okay, Adam Smith was Scottish. René Descartes was a Frenchie. Who do you figure Smith got the idea from? All right, probably, it doesn't really matter for us, for our purposes, because it's still the same idea, but it's still interesting to think about. I wonder where it came from. And I read a really good paper some time ago saying, hey, he probably got it from these other Scots, not from the continent, and that makes a lot of sense. So anyway, that's in the book as well. So that is, okay, so that's the second of the three influences: natural law, Cartesian deductivism, and now the last one. Now, if this were a live class, I would be asking, when did Adam Smith publish his famous book, The Wealth of Nations? And someone always knows that it's 1776. And then the whole class starts thinking, wait a minute. I heard something else happening in 1776. I don't remember what it was, but I think it was kind of a big deal. Then, oh yeah! All right, so then we get the American Revolution. Which, by the way, let's see if I've got I know I have at least 3 games on that war laying around here somewhere. This is my wargaming room as well. There it is. It's called 1775 Rebellion, one of my games on the American Revolution. You know, like 1775, the war started in 75. It wasn't until 76 that the U.S. declared independence. But the shooting actually started in 75, which is not very well known. And then it goes on to what, 1796? It's a long war. Not a continuous war, because first of all, the British were busy elsewhere in the world, and second, these were vast distances with very small armies. But none of this you need to know. So, this isn't just a coincidence, because many of the ideas that you see in Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations sound just like things that you hear Thomas Jefferson saying in 1776, and sound just like things you hear the French saying in 1789. The Declaration of the Rights of Man. When was the Declaration of the Rights of Man in France? Yes! 26 August 1789. Okay, so, and this was the French Revolution, where they're saying that no, we have rights. You can't tell me what to do. Now, very interesting stuff. Okay, so we have this political revolution taking place in Western Europe, and then, of course, extending over to North America. And this is really kind of interesting, because what it's rejecting is the idea that you get to rule over me because of the divine right of kings. No, you only rule over me with my consent. All right, the idea that individuals have rights, that individuals couldn't be told what to do, was a revolutionary political idea. Obviously, we have elements of it on other continents and at other times in Europe, but this is the time when it sticks. All right, and it stays past the initial beginnings of it. And this is something because I love military history, and I've got, like I said, war games all over the place here. Here's an exciting game on the Battle of the Coral Sea. I was reading a book on mutinies that sounded interesting. And first of all, navies don't like to talk about mutinies. They kind of act like they don't happen because they're kind of embarrassing. And second, what really struck me about this was, did you know that the number of mutinies went up after this? Because sailors started thinking to themselves, this was fascinating, started thinking to themselves, I ain't got to take this crap. I have rights. I am important in and of myself. All right. So this was a very powerful paradigm shift, if I want to use the word paradigm here. The idea that the individual had rights, that the individual was important. Now, having said that, let me see what I got here. Well, yeah, that's all I really need to say about that. Let me tie it in a little bit. The idea with Adam Smith is a lot of ideas with Adam Smith, of course, but one of the ideas being that no longer did he think it should be true that the sovereign of a nation said, okay, you will be in charge of making jams and jellies, you will do so-and-so, you will do so-and-so. Because monarchs were, for very logical reasons at the time, were running their countries like it was an office. Okay, you're going to take care of accounts payable, you're going to take care of new sales and so forth. But we had reached a point of development in Adam Smith's opinion that, hey, just say anybody that wants to do it can do it. Anybody wants to make jams and jellies, they should be free to make jams and jellies. Oh my gosh, what if nobody wants to make jams and jellies? If jams and jellies are profitable, somebody will make them. And if they're not, we shouldn't be making them, is what Adam Smith is arguing. But let everyone be free to make jams and jellies if they so desire. Because when you only assign one person or some subset of people, these people are greedy, because he's saying this is something natural to Homo sapiens, and they'll screw people over. If there's no competition, they'll screw people over. So we want the competition. We want to open it up and allow individuals to do whatever they want in terms of what they produce and what they buy, because this actually creates a more, it's hard to, I just had a conversation with a colleague over the word efficiency in the context of market, and it's not really a very good word to use. But this will create a better outcome for the consumer if we say anyone can do whatever they want in terms of what they buy and what they sell. So, those are the three big influences then. Let me write this on the board. Natural law, Cartesian, which I think I probably should have capitalized, Cartesian deductivism, which remember actually ends up being Scottish common sense philosophy in the book, and political individualism. There are elements of all these in Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. And these were major influences on the way he viewed the economy. All right, so I'm going to stop the video here for a second, and then I'm going to start it up again on the next thing that the book covers, and that is, what are the modern characteristics? Okay, this is what was true back in 1776, but what does economics look like today? And I happen to know. I'm going to tell you in a minute.